Tucsonans pitching in to help victims of Hurricanes Harvey and Irma.
It's really a community response on all fronts.
And a visit to one of the city's favorite desert destinations.
Tumamoc Hill is a cultural pillar of Tucson and the region.
This is Metro Week. Hi, I'm Vanessa Barchfield. Thanks so much for joining us. Relief efforts for Hurricanes Harvey and Irma are in full swing. We'll introduce you to some Tucson groups that are helping out in very different ways. We'll also delve into how the city will deal with a court decision on its policy of destroying seized guns. That and more after a look at the week's top stories from the Arizona Public Media Newsroom.
Arizona Attorney General Mark Brnovich filed suit against the Arizona Board of Regents today, claiming the university governing body has unconstitutionally raised tuition more than 300% over the last 15 years. The suit also demands that 3 state universities stop charging in-state tuition to students covered by the DACA program. Earlier, an appeals court ruled Maricopa Community College could not charge those students in-state tuition. It should be noted the Arizona Board of Regents holds the license for this station. On Tuesday, the Trump administration announced the phase-out of DACA, a program protecting children brought to the U.S. who do not have legal status. The move brought on the ire of people around Tucson. A rally supporting DACA recipients, who are often referred to as Dreamers, was held on the University of Arizona campus. 2 marches were also held at Tucson City Hall, where protesters called for local government action to protect Dreamers. County officials said there's not much they can do because DACA is a federal program. Southern Arizona Congressman Raul Grijalva introduced legislation this week to protect those covered by DACA. The White House gave Congress 6 months to find a solution before the DACA program is fully phased out. The Pima County Board of Supervisors voted this week to restrict the sale and use of exploding targets. Use of those targets is blamed for starting the sawmill fire in April. That fire burned 46,000 acres south of Tucson. Violation of the ordinance is a misdemeanor. For more on all of this week's stories, you can always visit our website. That address, news.azpm.org.
The Tucson-based organization World Care has been sending relief supplies to areas in crisis for the past 2 decades. After Hurricane Harvey and now Hurricane Irma, they're in disaster mode once again. I visited their warehouse this week to find out how things are going.
Things are absolutely crazy, as you can see behind me.
Courtney Slaneker is the head of World Care, which has already sent 3 truckloads of goods to Texas. And those boxes being sorted behind her today should ship in the next week.
So we're taking in personal hygiene products, cleaning supplies, household cleaning supplies, any type of like rebuilding materials like hand tools, hammers, rope, 2 to 3 inch deck screws and things like that they're going to be using during their kind of rebuilding recovery process. We're kind of that secondary response once your first responders are going in there and making rescues and things like that and still evacuating people. So we're that secondary response once people are in shelters and returning back to their homes. So that's why we take in the hygiene product and kind of your first necessities when you get back into your home, which is going to be, you're going to have a huge cleanup phase of your house depending on what type of disaster.
The organization's been there for a lot of disasters. It's been operating out of Tucson for more than 2 decades.
World Care was founded by Lisa Hopper in 1994. She started with the idea that there's so much surplus in the community and how can we utilize it. She went down on a medical trip down to Guatemala and they were going to be like furnishing a clinic. And what she realized when she got there was that these people don't need expensive x-ray machines and equipment that they don't know how to use. They need basic necessities.
Courtney says the organization has sent supplies to more than 70 countries during times of crisis.
We sent supply to Haiti. We were there for Hurricane Katrina. We were there for Hurricane Sandy, I believe, on the East Coast. We were there for the Midwest tornadoes during the, I think it was mid-2000s. We've sent supply internationally to Nepal when they had the earthquakes back in 2015. So really, it's a really wide range of disasters that we responded to, and it's both large and small disasters. I mean, sometimes some of the smaller ones, you don't hear about it on the news, but we will still send supply if we have it.
But disaster relief is actually only a small portion of what World Care does. Courtney says 80% of their work is on programs in the Tucson community.
So our Tools for Schools program refurbishes computers and gives them out to low-income students at a low cost with a referral. Our Tools for Health program gives out hygiene packs, and then we loan out durable medical equipment at no cost to anyone in the community. When you look at all of our programs as a whole, our biggest thing is to prevent waste. And we do that by either taking it in and redistributing it or taking it in and recycling it. So even if we get a computer in that's from the 90s that we can't use and there's not even software that you can update it anymore, we'll break it down into its basic components and recycle it to prevent waste from going into the landfill and to also prevent toxins from going into the landfill and from going into our environment.
She says a major part of preventing waste is simply finding someone who needs it.
There's always someone that needs it. You're always going to find someone that needs it. And I think World Care has really served as that bridge between, an agency or an individual that has surplus or has something that they can't use anymore and someone that actually really needs it. Now, when you look at the disaster, a lot of the times we ask for new products because we have to vet it. Right now, the people are in very vulnerable positions. They're living in close quarters. We have to make sure the supply that we're sending is absolutely perfect and doesn't have any contaminants or anything like that. So that philosophy is a little bit different in disaster relief. You want to send new product, you want to send product that can be used. But all of our other programs really encompass the recycling and the reusing aspect.
Courtney says right now, those other programs aren't really the focus.
We're pretty limited. There's 5 of us on staff, so we're heavily reliant on volunteers. So our local programs do take a back burner and we kind of put them on hold. We still address community needs, like we still gave out a wheelchair this morning and a hygiene pack and a computer, but it's definitely slowed down a lot just because we're tending to the disaster right now. So all staff is in disaster mode.
Gail Pastor is one of World Care's regular volunteers.
I've been with World Care for like 2 years now, and started out at their old place over by the old Sam Levitt's, and originally just doing breakdown, whatever they needed for volunteer. Normally that's what I do, is I do the breakdown, but as Courtney said, we're definitely in disaster mode, and it's coming in, thank God, it's coming in leaps and bounds, and that's what we need, and that's what they need.
Gail and the other volunteers sort through all the goods. They put all the shampoos together, the sponges, the medical supplies, box after box after box. I asked Gail what keeps her coming back.
It makes you feel good to know that you're helping, no matter what you're doing in here, whether it's this or whether it's the breakdown that we normally do on a day-to-day basis. And I think it's making the people who donate feel better about things, Just keep coming. I don't know, I'm just here. As we all know, we have other things at home that we could do, but this is important.
Courtney says the Tucson response to Harvey has been overwhelming.
We have received an outpouring of support from individuals, from agencies, from schools, you name it, they're involved. We have a list of about 40 agencies that are doing their own internal collections. I have a list of about 35 agencies that are collecting for us. So it's really a community response on all fronts.
Courtney, who's been doing this work for a while, has a theory about why people are so eager to give during times of crisis.
When you see other people suffering, it doesn't matter where you're from or what you believe in or what your politics are. This is just about making sure that people can have their basic needs met and recover from this disaster, because it's going to take a lot of time. And I think most of the people in Tucson see, this is a time for us to come together and be unified in helping these people, because we would want them to help us.
We'll hear about another organization sending supplies to Texas at the end of the show. For many years, Tucson's beloved Tumamoc Hill was, at least officially, closed to visitors during daytime hours. That changed this week. The Hill is now open every day from 4 a.m. until 10 p.m. I met Interim Director Ben Wilder on Tumamoc this week to talk about that change.
In the last 10, 15 years, Tumamoc Hill has really become an incredible gathering center for the community. And the hours as we had them didn't really reflect the reality of use. And we were in the position of being kind of counter purposes to the engagement and the interaction we're looking to build here with the community. So rather than telling grandmothers and grandchildren they can't walk at 4 in the afternoon, it makes a little more sense to focus on people here at 2 in the morning that probably shouldn't be here.
And how's the community response been so far?
It's been fantastic. I mean, I think we got to a point there where I don't know how many people were responding or really following the hours we had posted. So again, this follows this kind of the natural use of the hill. But I think more so than just the set hours of when people can walk or can't walk, it reflects kind of our commitment to the community of Tucson and the kind of underpinning belief that Tumamoc Hill is a cultural pillar of Tucson and the region. And there's been 4,000 years of use of this site just at the Santa Cruz River at our base, 2,500 years of active human occupation on Tumamoc Hill. And this kind of pilgrimage of sense of people going up and down the hill we see today is really just a continuation of the valuation of the use of this site, and that's going on into the future.
So now I want to shift to talk about the work that's actually being done here. Tumamoc is, of course, a research center as well. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the research that you guys are working on?
Yeah, absolutely. So science really started here at Tumamoc Hill about 115 years ago. So in 1903, Andrew Carnegie established the Carnegie Institution, now the Carnegie Institution for Science. And one of their first physical site was here, were the buildings right there at the desert lab. And it was a site to study the physiological adaptations of plants to aridity. In other words, how the heck can plants actually grow in such a hot environment? And from that moment to today, one of the hallmarks of research here is long-term approach. So trying to understand these kind of the desert and the ecology, the dynamics, the changing of the relationships between plants and individual species and plants and animals, but over long time scales. And if you look and try to study something for a couple years or 5 years, you'll have results and conclusions and a story, but you draw that out further and the story changes completely. And it's only from that long-term approach can really understand how the desert functions. So saguaros are a perfect example of that. So the Saguaro National Park East actually got established because there was a concern that the saguaros were going away. There was no population. They were all gone. And so the research done here actually answered the question of how does the populations of saguaro functions. And it's over decadal timescales. So the establishment of baby saguaros has to come in the most perfect conditions of the right amount of summer rain, lack of freezes the following winter, and it's kind of these Goldilocks conditions. Everything has to align right, and that was research that was done here on the world's best studied saguaro population that informed the establishment of Saguaro National Park and the saguaro research everywhere else.
And is there anything that's unique about the ecosystem right around Tumamoc that gives you insight into the Sonoran Desert in a way that you wouldn't if you were studying it maybe 5 miles from here or a little further south?
Well, the volcanic outcrop of Tumamoc Hill is actually geologically unique within the context of the Tucson Mountains and the whole Tucson Valley. So that in itself is, and a mountain is part of that complex. Actually, it's that volcanic uplift that made the Santa Cruz River pop up, and so Tucson, or we now call Tucson, spring at the base of the Black Mountain, is because of a mountain and the water that would come up there. So there's a lot of local geology here that makes this unique, and one of the reasons that the researchers in the early 1900s established their lab here on Tumamoc Hill because of this kind of diverse habitat. You get the flats on the lowlands, this large volcanic hill, all these different north, south, east, west slope effects, and a great saguaro population. But zooming out kind of on the Sonoran Desert vegetation ecosystem, this is Arizona Upland Sonoran Desert subdivision, which you find throughout the rest of the Tucson region. Well, one of the other unique things that the first scientists did was they established fences along the whole edge of the 860-acre property, excluding cattle. So to actually see how the desert functions with this large impact of cattle grazing excluded, so a control site. And there are very few to hardly any such sites of this vegetation zone in the Sonoran Desert that, for sure, that has that long depth of cattle exclusion.
One of your focuses has been community engagement, and of course extending the hours as part of that. Are you working on any other projects to improve community engagement?
Yeah, one of the really exciting things that we're just about to release on Monday, September 11th is the Tumamoc Tour, which is a fully bilingual app that tells the story of the Sonoran Desert, but through the lens of Tumamoc Hill. So we are a College of Science site of the University of Arizona, and this is the sister app to the Mount Lemmon Science Tour. That was narrated by Joey Burns, and music by Calexico, and this app features music by Calexico and Gabriel Naima Moore, and it has 6 different sections that are timed as you walk up the hill to kind of immerse yourself into these stories that we're talking about now. You know, we love this site so much, but I don't think the majority of the community realizes really how remarkable its history and present is.
Nature is obviously all around us here on the hill, but can you talk about the sort of more cultural heritage of Tumamoc?
Yeah, absolutely. So the name Tumamoc is actually an Anglicization of the Tonotum word Chamamagi Duag, which means Hill of the Horned Lizard. And so that hard T is kind of an adaptation of the Ch. So this site is incredibly important to the Tono Altum community and culture. The Hohokam actually established a village site on the top of the hill, and the Tono Altum consider themselves the ancestors of the Hohokam. So it's that cultural heritage that is that as we walk the hill today, we're directly connecting to that.
Arizona Illustrated produced a postcard story from Tumamoc earlier this year. You can find it on our website. The Arizona Supreme Court said recently that Tucson's policy of destroying seized guns was out of sync with state law. City Council member Karin Uhlich came into our studios this week to discuss the repeal of that policy. And we started off by talking about how we got to this point.
It's a policy that's been in place for close to 20 years in Tucson. It's a police department practice that seized weapons were destroyed rather than put back into circulation. And it was the will of the police department and our public safety officials and elected officials, and I think our community, that those guns just not be put back in circulation. The state legislature has stepped in and through a court battle essentially directed that it's a matter of state interest that localities be compelled for guns that are operable and legal, that those be made available for sale to licensed gun dealers and put back into circulation.
The National Rifle Association's been backing policies that force police to resell seized guns in cities around the country. I asked if the organization factored into the fight here in Tucson.
You know, I suspect the NRA is involved at the national level with there's a legislative group that drafts bills that can be introduced at the state level. So other states and conservative legislatures are looking at these types of bills. There's just a real tug of war right now, if you will, between many state governments and local governments, particularly in urban areas. And unfortunately, that reflects the divide that we're seeing at all levels of our country right now. And so this, I think, is a symptom of that argument over, can a local community, through its own values and its own laws, shape the quality of life, or does the state do that more often? And so, you know, the NRA and other groups that want to influence that debate operate mainly at the national level. I'm not sure if they had state involvement. They may have filed an amicus brief in this case. I didn't track that.
And so will gun sales to licensed dealers happen immediately?
You know, I'm not sure about the prescribed timetables, but we will follow the mandates that we're under. My understanding is that we do need to follow our normal process where we put property out for auction. We'll do it through our existing vendor for disposing of these kinds of you know, products and assets. So it'll follow that. I do want to emphasize again that, you know, this was a policy of our police department, and one that was embraced by elected officials in the community. It wasn't an ideological you know, stance or something that, it's common sense. And I have to tell you, Vanessa, what I think about, there's no denying that if a gun has been seized, there's a crime associated with that weapon and the owner of that weapon. if my child had been killed, or friend or family member by a weapon. I just think it adds such pain to a wound to just cavalierly say that weapon's going back out. And it doesn't make any sense to me. I don't see the counterbalancing value of what we're being compelled to do. If we can mitigate in any way the potential for that weapon to be used again, I just don't see why we wouldn't. And I think denying that human story behind every incident lives is, I think it's callous, and I think it's misguided.
There are other communities, of course, across the country, like Los Angeles, that have similar policies to the one Tucson had. Do you know of any other communities that have been compelled by the state to repeal them?
It's my understanding that similar state maneuvers, the legislation sort of that drove this particular case, that those are being considered in Texas and some other states. And again, it's very much like, for example, SB 1070, which was targeting the immigrant communities, that we saw that bill spring up all around the country, because there's a centralized effort to provide legislative tools to conservative legislators who can then roll these out across the state. It's a part of that tug of war, unfortunately, that's happening in the country, whose values get to dictate the lives of us at the local level.
And do you have any idea of what the financial ramifications will be for Tucson? I mean, of course, now I believe Tucson won't lose state aid that was threatened, but presumably the city should also make money from these gun sales, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a bit hard to project. I suppose that the initial year there might be, tens of thousands of dollars, let's say. It won't certainly approach anything close to $1 million. And, we'll take that opportunity to bolster public safety. We can provide protective gear to our officers on the streets. We can perhaps fund greater prevention efforts, and something that, again, gets at what we think is the community's will on this issue.
And of course, you mentioned that the court case was really about sort of city autonomy versus state authority.
Yes.
What do you think will be the longer lasting legacy of this case? I mean, will this apply to other policies as well?
Well, I think there will be attempts, endless attempts, to assert through state legislators an undermining, particularly in urban areas, of local control. However, local control is embedded in the state's constitution. Charter cities exist for a reason, and Tucson has been very successful in court in defending local control. The state has to prove that there's a compelling state interest that trumps local interest in most cases, and that's something that I don't think any of us wants to see eroded. We choose where to live, where to raise our families, where to enjoy a quality of life, and we create that at the local level primarily. So I think that is something we are all going to want to watch very closely.
Now we check in with another group that's been all hands on deck to get supplies to Houston. In many ways, Cody's Friends is similar to World Care, the organization we met earlier in the show. They're both collecting donations from Tucsonans to ship to areas in Harvey's path. But Cody's Friends is serving a very different population. Its sole focus is on animals.
Cody's Friends started when Cody was in 5th grade.
That's Cody's mom, Amber Allen.
He had to do a report about a hero, and he chose John F. Kennedy. So he did this report, and he looked at the quote, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." And he came up and he goes, "Mom, what am I doing for my country?" And I said, "Well, what do you want to do for your country?"
I just realized that I really wasn't doing anything to help the community, and I always cared about animals a lot, so I just decided that I should do something for animals.
Cody's 16 now, a junior in high school. Amber says when he started the organization almost 8 years ago, it was very grassroots.
He made flyers and left them on people's front porches in the neighborhood. And the first Saturday of every month, we would drive by and they would slide their donations out on the front porch. And then gradually it just you know, just one step at a time, but it just grew and has been able to help more and more animals.
Cody's Friends is a family endeavor. Both his parents are involved and his older sister. The organization's taken over an entire building that Cody's parents own. Room after room, piled high with bags of dog food and cat food, collars and pet toys, all stuff that's been donated to help pets in need. Right now, a lot of the donations are specifically for pets in Texas. And that's because that's how Tucsonans have been saying they want to help out.
We started getting calls from people saying, hey, you know, are you guys going to do something with Hurricane Harvey? Is there someplace I can bring donations? And then 4 rescue group, people that were involved in rescue, came and they said, look, we want to take a truck to Hurricane Harvey. We want to help these animals. Can you help us? Can you help us get donations? And we're like, absolutely. So we started putting the word out and the donations just poured in.
So many donations, in fact, that they've already sent 3 loads of pet supplies.
We've had a lot of feedback, both from those organizations that come and they stay in contact with us. We're not responsible for the vehicles or for the people that go. They're just good citizens and involved in animal rescue, and they borrow trucks or they rent trucks. And so they do contact us back and say, look, you know, we've left Houston, now we're going to Port Arthur or Beaumont, or, you know, tell the next group that's coming, this is what they need, this is where, you know, so there's a lot of coordination going on.
Amber says they'll be sending another load in the coming days. And meanwhile, Cody's Friends' day-to-day work serving pets in this community goes on.
Last year we donated over 500,000 pounds of food. From March on, over 500,000 pounds. This year, we could easily hit close to 1 million.
They send food and pet supplies to animal rescue groups all over Arizona and to homeless shelters.
The Camp Bravo, the homeless veteran shelter, we have women's shelters that come, we have pet food banks that come, we have the soup kitchens down, Caridad Kitchen comes. Anyone that serves people in need, because those people many times also have animals that need. So the organizations come here and they can get whatever they need for free.
Cody's Friends also supplies the Tucson Fire Department.
If they get a call and they go out and people are, you know, have to go to the hospital, or people are in need and they have an animal that, you know, doesn't have food or whatever, the fire department comes here, they get their food, they get their leashes, collars, they get bowls, they get whatever they need for these people to help them care for their animal.
Lately, a lot of the donations have been coming directly to the front porch of this building. But Cody's Friends also accept stuff in what they call their donation stations.
They're boxes basically, but they're, you know, we call them donation stations. And the instant that box gets full, we're there to clean it out, get it back here to the community room. We clean the items up and get them ready to go out.
I'm Terry Bright, and I work with our donation station program in the community.
Terry volunteers here almost every day. It's one of a number of animal welfare groups she gives her time to.
There's such a need for what Cody's does. They help the rescues so much. They help people in need so much. And by what we're able to provide for the rescues, it frees them up for resources for vet bills, boarding. So if we're able to ease their load on some food expenses and other expenses for supplies, it makes a huge difference.
So, having started something that's grown so big over the past few years, I asked Cody if his friends and classmates know much about Cody's Friends.
Most of them don't know, just because probably don't watch the news and aren't really involved with the community, but some of them do know, some of my close friends, and they think it's a good thing.
He says he plans to carry on with Cody's Friends, and his reasons for doing that are pretty simple and directly related to that assignment he got on JFK in the 5th grade.
It makes me feel like I'm doing something for my country, essentially.
We just kind of look up and look out and say, okay, where can we help next? So it's a good feeling.
Amber says she hears from people all the time that they want to help out.
I think the best thing to do, if you go on codysfriends.org, on the website, there's a tab that says where to donate, and there you'll see all the businesses around southern Arizona that have one of our donation stations. And, you know, grab that leash out of the carport that you haven't used for 10 years or whatever, and just put it in the box. And it'll be going to do good. It'll, you know, recycling.
That's our show this week. Keep up with all the latest news from Southern Arizona on our website, news.azpm.org. Thanks so much for watching.